Good evening and welcome to tonight's Monday Live. Just me tonight. Stuart hasn't been able to be in today, so I hope he's doing well. So plenty to talk about from the last weekend. Olympic qualification, playoffs, LPGA wins, all sorts of things that we can cover today. I'll do a brief bit on that and then we'll start running through the questions that have already been coming in. So a little quick roundup from the weekend. Obviously playoffs galore. PGA, on the PGA Tour, Scotty Scheffler does it again. Quite incredible the way he can carry on winning, and now 6 wins in the first 6 months of the year. Only Arnold Palmer has done that before. Super impressive, and it's great to see Tom Kim. For me, seeing Tom Kim at the top of the leaderboard, I think such a star of the future. I think to see that play off with Scotty Scheffler, someone he clearly admires massively, and I think has spoken to us for tips on his own game and how to improve his own game through the last year or so. And great to see him at the top of the leaderboard, but yet again Scheffler comes out on top. DP World Tour, Guido Migliozzi coming out on, I hope I've got his first name right there, coming out on top in a 3-way playoff with Marcus Chenault and Joe Dean. KLM Open, I think it's a really interesting tournament, the way they get the amateurs out to play the par 3 with the pros. I think it's great that DP World Tour, European Tour have always tried those sorts of things, and I think for me as a viewing public watching, just as a golf fan watching, I think to try some of those things to freshen it up, I think coming off the back of a major championship week, I think makes it really fun. Personally, I like watching those sorts of things. Live Tour, Tyrrell Hatton coming out on top. Tyrrell having a great week, and the scoring from that team absolutely incredible. Third round of 20 under, 7 shots better than the next best team between Tyrrell and John Rahm and a couple of the other guys in the team. Quite impressive, and I think he's trending the right way. I think wouldn't surprise me to see him up there at Troon in a few weeks' time as well. I mean, massive crowd in Nashville. I think the size of the crowds there they had, absolutely vast. I think it's interesting seeing how that's developing, and clearly the slightly more relaxed format's starting to have a little bit of a pull. Helps having the current US Open champion there as well. But yeah, again, great performance from Tyrrell. And then LPGA, the Ladies Major, Ladies PGA Championship, Sahali Golf Club, where Vijay Singh won years back. I think potentially the most tree-lined course I've ever seen. I mean, it's frightening just from the sofa watching the TV to see Amy Yang win there, and she was streets ahead going to the last few holes, had a Rory-esque finish of a bogey, double bogey, so 3 over the last 3 holes, but had so much in the tank to get over the line. Truly impressive. Seeing Lilia Vu tied second, her game's trending back the right way again, and checking a couple of notes. She's obviously nearly missed the cut, which very difficult for her. Great first round, poor second round, and I think the spotlight being on her, I think it's the kind of course where you don't have to go too far wrong to really suffer. And I think what we're seeing, her now, whether it's personal expectation, whether it's just feeling the pressure, it's just been so good for such a long part of the year that unfortunately the game's got to dip at some point, and looks like that second round sort of bit her a little bit. Another great tournament from Charlie, really strong performance. Probably looks a bit like the Duchess at Oben, where she's used to playing, how narrow that course is. Again, a bit of a shame not just to finish off the 3rd round, a little of a stumble on 17, but again, major championship, tied 16th. Great consistency of performances, and Olympic qualification as well. So, a brief roundup of everything that's been going on. Obviously, a bit of consternation about how the process has gone about with Bryson not qualifying. However, the qualification criteria was top 15 in the world golf rankings. You can have up to 4 players. So, for the US, they've got Scotty Scheffler at number 1, Xander Schauffele at I think 2 or 3. I'm going to glance across to where I've got those numbers on the screen. Schauffele at number 3, Wyndham Clark at number 5, and then Colin Morikawa at number 7. And Bryson is at 8 or 9. He nearly made it playing so few ranking tournaments. However, the criteria were set as they were, and the top 4 Americans are there. For Great Britain, we've got Tommy Fleetwood and Matt Fitzpatrick. And for the ladies, Charlie Hull and Georgia Hall. So a couple of really strong teams there. A couple of the other girls, Manon Deroy for Belgium, who we've worked with. It'd be great to see her there as well. So again, Olympics nearly there. mad. Anyway, that's a very brief roundup of what's been going on. Going to get through to all the questions, fire in as many questions as you like. It's just me tonight, so the more questions I get, I can hopefully get through a ton of them this evening. I won't be able to do technique stuff. If it's very, very basic, I might be able to answer some of those, but that's not my speciality. So with those ones, I would save those when Stuart's back, but anything equipment-wise, let me know and I'll do my best to answer them. So I'm going to start to run through these questions for you now. A few of them from Evgeny van der Geest. I know who that man is. Happy Monday. Humble brag, some 3 rounds in the 60s, 66, 69, 69 at Royal Mid Surrey this weekend. Very good, and glad the driver and the 4-iron are working out. We did a bit of work on those recently, just fine-tuning the specs for them. But question on the wedges, tend to duff chips even in these conditions where it's firming up a little bit. A lot of it's technique, but I'm also playing a relatively low bounce, Bettinardi 54, 10 and 68 wedges. Tend to use 54 around the greens. Would you suggest for Vokeys to bend a 56 12D to 55 or the 54 10S 1 week at a 55? What would that do to bounce and forgiveness? So technically you get the same number of bounce. So the 12 down one goes to 11, the 10 up one goes to 11. However, the two sole shapes are really quite different. The D grind does have a bigger peak. So I use the D grind bent down to 55 myself because I tend to get, I'll just grab my wedge, I tend to get a little bit hands forward and therefore a little bit steeper. So on the D grind, I'll hold this up to camera here, the D grind has a little bit of a steeper front half to it here. So I've done a little bit of grinding and softened the peak down on the top. But the S grind is a little bit of a shallower, more kind of softer progression. And if you tend to get a little bit steeper, a slightly kind of more steeply graduated front edge will stop it digging quite so much. So if you tend to get hands forward, then the D grind turned down, because the front half is actually peaked up a little bit more, will give you a little bit more to play with. But because of the turf we've got here, where it's a little bit tighter, doing what I've done there, just softening that ridge off, I'm actually going to get a fresh D grind. Bear with me one moment. Right, sorry for that. So fresh D grind here, you can see there's quite a peak on the top edge there. So for UK turf, what we'll tend to do is just to smooth that bit down a little bit so that it's not quite so harsh. Because if you were to play that on a shallower, if you haven't got to get your hands forward and drive into it, if you tend to want to play a little bit of a nipper, then that back edge can catch and kick. So for UK turf, what we tend to do is just take that peak down a little bit. But from a forgiveness point of view of not digging into the turf, the D grind actually gives you a little bit more to play with and will let you get your hands a little more forward and pinch it, squeeze it slightly more if that's the way that you deliver the club. Chris Johnson, could you compare stock Torchrome 65S against Ventus TR Red S in a Ping 10K? I've got the stock set up currently, but I have the Ventus from a previous driver. We'll do our best with just me, James. I don't want to hop out of you too much. We're going to have a little look and see. James is going to see if he can grab those components for me, and if not, I'll hop out and grab them shortly. So I will come back to that one. James is just trying to find those now. Richard Jagger, hi Simon, can you explain what's a TT S300, so TT True Temper S300 shaft? I know it's a stiff shaft, but why is there S300 for dynamic gold and AMT white, black, etc.? So the 300 part of the S300 or the R300 is it's weight sorting. So True Temper weight sort their shafts. So you've got an S200, S300, S400. So essentially they're all the same shaft, but the S400s are the heavier of the weight tolerance, so they go into the S400 batch. The S200s are the lighter of the weight tolerance batch, so they go into the S200 batch. Same, X100s, there is an X200 if they were to weight sort that way for some of the tour guys, but ultimately it's a weight sorting process, so that it doesn't really change the flex or the structure of the shaft, but they will play just a little less harsh in the 200s and that little heavier, a little more solid in the 400s of those. So that's essentially all it is. S for stiff and 300 for the kind of the middle I guess you could call it middle kind of tier of their weight sorting. So it's literally a bit like a kind of hard step or a soft step. The structure of the shaft doesn't really change, but the weight shifts just a fraction. When I say a fraction, it's within a couple of grams, 1 or 2 grams. So it's just say the top and the bottom end of their tolerances. So Chris, I'll pop that driver. James has got those components for me. I'll pop that back together shortly and give that a hit. James Doherty, evening Simon, how do you view graduating swing weights across an iron set? Do some players require consistent gapping or some players the same swing weight across the set? So the one thing to remember with swing weight is a static measure. So it doesn't take into account what the components are and how they move. So it's a fulcrum that's depending which camera James can pick. If you can pick the side one, we'll see it in the background. Give me a thumbs up if you can go to that, and I'll. There's a scale here where it's a static balance. There's a fulcrum here, 15-inch fulcrum, and then you put the club on top, and it gives us a scale of letters and numbers for how heavy proportionate in the club head it is. However, what it doesn't do is it doesn't tell you what it actually feels like to swing. So swing weight on its own is a baseline, but if you statically balance the set, what you're not taking into account is the fact that they are moving at different speeds and their shafts are longer or shorter, so the momentum changes. So technically, to match how they feel across the set, you've got to graduate them a little bit heavier, club to club, as you go from say 4 iron to 5 iron to 6 iron to 7 iron. So as you go down the set, to feel the same, to swing the same, they need to progress very, very slightly. So a lot of tour players in the past have played flatline swing weights. I think there's probably just a consistency and a confidence that that's what they've always played. But actually, in terms of matching, there's going to be a little bit of a progression through the set, generally about a swing weight point from top to bottom, generally. But it does vary a little bit player to player if you really, really dial in. And there are some players who you have to go to those sort of lengths. Most players can cope with a kind of about a point progression top to bottom, but the really, really sensitive players need it dialing into kind of 0.1, 0.2 of a swing weight point. So, but it is something that to match them, a progression is the right way to be. So, I'm going to pop these drivers together for Chris. We'll give those a hit. So, what we've got here, we've got the stock chrome driver shaft 65 stiff, and then the TR red. So in the stiff. Ventus TR red. So I'll pop those in the 10K. Just got to get the right screw here. So the 10K, for those that aren't aware, is there's a little bit more mass at the back. It's designed to be a little bit more stable, a little more forgiving than the standard model. But it does swing a little bit differently. Because there's so much mass at the back of the head, it does swing a little heavier. So let's just, it's a different screw for the 10K. I should have remembered that. Should be one in the red pot, hopefully. Yeah. So what ping I've got is a slightly different size of thread. That little bit, depending on which camera we're on this one, that little bit at the top is the one for the 10K is a little bit smaller. So the normal screw won't fit. So, right. So the standard chrome shaft is pretty stable. It's structurally fairly strong, fairly tip stable. 65, 67 grams, but swings relatively light as a balance as a result. So I'm going to move this onto a view where it's a fairway. Put it on that. There we go. So for me, where it's a slightly higher balance, that's not something that suits me particularly, but what you'll find out of the chrome shaft is that, it is quite a stable, quite a solid feel. So, that one there, spin at 2,380, I didn't quite strike it, so the efficiency's down a little bit, but I'll give it one more go there. So where I play kind of a smaller head, a little bit of a lower launching, this one at 10.5 is just going to fly up a little bit for me. But, you know, very, very stable. As a shaft, there's a little bit of kick through it, a little bit kick through the middle section, but it's still quite a stout feel at impact. You know, spin just under 2,800 on that. So I'll switch over to the Ventus. So with the pings, because the thread's very, very tight in there, you generally have to give them a little tap just to release them. For those that were wondering what I was doing. Highly technical. All right. Let's get that into the neutral position. So the Ventus, the TR series, is a little stiffer in the butt section. So it's still got that responsive tip that the Red series is designed for, but a little more stout in the upper part of the shaft. So because it's not a high balance shaft like the Chrome, swings a little more, there's a little more feel of the club head to that. So for me, in the way I swing it, this flows a little more naturally. So a little bit more of a solid contact. I think the Red, you can definitely feel the bottom half of the shaft move a bit more. The Chrome's still fairly stable in the tip section, so it feels a little tighter. We can see spin still up there just under 3,000 by 1 revolution for this one. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily change that flight profile that much. I mean, that one and the last shot with the Chrome ended up right next to one another. I think you get a little bit of a slightly smoother feel through the TR Red than you're going to get out the Chrome. Some of that's just quality of materials. So yeah, a little bit more of a general load kick through the bottom, but stability under the hands in the TR. A bit more kick out the middle in the Chrome and stiffer tip section. So yeah, the last one with that and the two with this have landed up pretty much on top of one another. For me, I'm more consistent with the TR because the balance is a little bit better for me. The Chrome's a bit more back weighted. That had a little bit less spin onto it, but ultimately a bit more feedback through the bottom half of the shaft on the Ventus TR, whereas in the Chrome, a little more kick out the middle, but stable in the tip. Very, very similar raw weights, total weights, but the balance point a little bit different as well. So hope that helped. Kevin T, any chance of a 100-yard comp at the end? Unfortunately, I'm on my own. Well, I can always win, so there's always a good point to that. I can hit a 100-yard shot if you'd really like me to, but I probably won't tell you very much. But Stiletto, what a name. What a name. Hi chaps, love the channel. Can you get a fit with Simon? So you can do. My diary isn't online, so whereas with any of the other fitters you can book them via the online appointments diary. Mine, because my diary is a bit more restricted based on having to do, you know, this, filming, running the business. I'm not as available as some of the other guys, so the best bet is to either call the studio or email in, and then we can give you next availability from there. I'm currently looking at about 3 to 4 weeks out as things stand, but I still do fit and will for a very long time. So horse racing legends, no questions tonight, Simon. Take the pressure off. It's very kind of you, much appreciated. Josh Wright, in the fairway wood shafts, can you explain / demo the difference between Oben Devotion and Devotion HB and your Koshi Purple? Well, certainly an explanation of how they vary. The Koshi Purple is designed with a more responsive tip, so it's kind of like a slightly, I guess in principle, lower torque responsive tip, so a little bit of launch, mid to low spin, whereas the Devotion, actually Devotion generally is a slightly stiffer tip than the Koshi Purple, so it feels actually a little bit tighter in the tip end. So it's where actually the Koshi Purple is actually a really good fairway shaft for that specific reason, because it gives a little bit of kick and just lets it flight a little bit more, or it feels a little bit more comfortable to get going off the deck. Whereas the Devotion, relative to weight, the standard model, the original model Devotion, is going to feel a little bit tighter. So it generally suits someone who's a bit more of a hitter, who wants to feel the club head really tight at impact. It's a little bit, in principle, a little bit of a lower launch, lower spin shaft than the Koshi Purple. And then the HB is the high balance version of that. So, you know, the difference to the HB is that the counterbalance element of it makes the club swing lighter, brings the balance point up towards the handle. So if you tend to miss right or tend to get the club drop behind you, then that high balance helps you to turn the club through and get club face squaring up a little bit more easily through the ball from a timing standpoint. So from a feel point of view, the original model Devotion's going to feel the stiffest, and the Koshi Purple will feel the smoothest, and the Devotion HB is going to be the easiest to get the toe through and squaring up. But you know, three great shafts. I played the Koshi Purple for a number of years now. I just dropped from an X to an S when the X got too heavy at 81 grams for me, and the S is at 77, so that made it much more playable for me. But a lovely fairway wood shaft from a smoothness point of view. Aidan, what are some options to try in the driver for a Modus 120X iron player? Don't like anything too soft or too stiff in the handle with woods. A bit of a Goldilocks that, wasn't it? Not too soft or too stiff. So Modus 120X, in terms of, so if we're looking at what would in theory complement it, we'd say, right, where does it sit from a weight point of view at just under 120 grams? It's in the upper half, it's upper mid. But the Modus is a soft but stiff tip shaft. So something that's, from what you've described, if you're wanting to match that, something with a bit of responsiveness but then stable down the bottom. And if we're looking at proportionate weights, in something around the 70 gram mark, so not too heavy but with a bit of guts to it. I'd certainly be looking at, I mean, the Speeder NX could feel a little bit firm. Around 70 gram mark, let's think. Actually, one of the ones that could work very well, the balance point's not quite as tip end, but Tensei Pro Blue 1K in the 70s at 69 grams. That's a really smooth shaft. That's certainly, it's not going to feel too harsh. The Tenseis are a very smooth feeling shaft. Thank you, James. So you've got the 1K, Tensei 1K Pro Blue. So as you can see from this, you know, it's the blue profile, so it's stable handle, stable tip, softer in the middle. The 1Ks are, I mean, this one's, it's a very inoffensive shaft in that respect. It's not, it doesn't play overly heavy. Relative to your Moduses, you might want something a little more on the tip section, so potentially the 1K white, but maybe in a stiff, so it doesn't feel overly harsh. Those certainly from a weight point of view would sit in a good place and give you some feedback, I think, so that's definitely a key thing. But either one of those should work well. The white for a little lower spin, the blue for something a little bit more mid-launch. Potentially the white from a balance point of view would match the Modus 120. Papa B, hello young man. Thank you very much. I've heard that some professional golfers have their wedges and even short irons bent flatter. Could you please explain or show the benefits of that? You're the best. It's very kind of you. I shall certainly show that for you. So one of the elements from a performance point of view is to do with start lines. So the more loft you have on the club, the more that lie changes affect the way the face is effectively pointing because of the amount of loft. So I'll use a sort of pen to, actually, there's a, you see on one of the tables if there's that, that magnetic pointer. So the last thing you want with a wedge is for a right-hander is for it to start left, because that means the face is turning over, that's reducing spin, and that makes distance control tough. So one of the things that you want to happen is you want the ball to start right. You can be a little bit more positive with it, but the face not closing keeps the spin up. So that's one element of it. I'll see, depending if he can or can't find it, I'll do a basic one here. If James finds the tool, we'll do a much better one than this. So if you think that's, you know, flat and pointing square, if all I do is to tip that up, the pen starts to point more that way. Ah, much better one. Thank you very much. So this should be much easier to see. So if I set it up square, it's pointing dead at the camera. If all I do is rotate it up, it starts to point that way. And then vice versa, if I point it down, it starts to point that way. So this is the one we don't want. We don't want it coming in upright and then starting left, because that basically means that, a bit like a draw spin, you're turning it over, turning spin down. So that's one of the reasons. The other is that your hand position changes a little bit on a wedge shot. So, you know, most of the time, you know, on a full swing, we're making a big move, and left side comes up, handle lifts a little bit, and for a lot of players we put the toe down. So you start to deliver a kind of a higher handle position. So yes, the more flexible you are, the better technique. Yes, we want to work it around to keep the handle lower because it stops the face from turning over. However, for a lot of golfers, we tend to get a little bit handle high and toe down. In the wedges, actually what happens, the closer to the green we get, we tend to sit into it a little bit more. Handle drops down. I'm going to move this way a bit so I'm in front of the camera from a handle point of view. So what we're not doing is we're not standing up here and making big swings there. We're actually sitting down into it. We drop into it a little bit more. If it's something like a bunker shot, then you can get down there. We're really sitting down into it. Dropping that handle allows the club to work underneath a little bit more. So it gives a slightly softer shot profile. So if we're more up here, we're going to deliver an over the top, kind of stronger on top delivery. We're not looking to do that with wedges. For the quieter shots, we're looking to deliver a softer position. So from up there, I can't get that club underneath very easily because of the plane, my wrist gets in the way. From down here, I can let the club swing underneath and keep the loft on the club. So if I do it this way around, you can see that can work under, whereas from here, it works around. So the lower handle position puts us in a better position for softer wedge shots. And as a result, we need that lie to be flatter so that it's not sat looking at us, looking left. And then you create that, essentially if the heel catches, hopefully you won't whiff it like that, but you get that kind of contact, catches the ground, head turns over, goes off left. So that, I'll shred that horrible divot I've just made down. So getting the hands a little lower and having the flatter lie allows us to play softer shots like that. And then lets us use the bounce, use the sole, use the turf interaction to guide the club through the turf rather than, if you think, if you're starting to catch that bit of the club on the turf, that's not pretty. So we want to use all of that sole. So the flatter lie, for a variety of reasons, tends to be better in the wedges. Not always, but probably about 90% of the time. So let's scroll back up. AQ, would love to see you do a collab with Mark Crossfield. Would be fun to hear the discussion. We're always open to that. Someone like Mark's very knowledgeable, and we'd love to have a discussion with any of those guys, whether it's Mark, Rick, Pete, any of them, anything they want to talk about fitting wise, we're more than happy. Ultimately, it's anything fitting wise. There are, I guess, not templates, but there are principles. Big word for a Monday evening. There are principles that you try to work to. You're always trying to help the player, whether it's coaching or fitting, you're just trying to do the best for the player. So it's how can you make that operate best? There are some physics relating to ball flight laws, club head speed, angle of attack, what that dictates with regard to what you can and can't achieve from a ball flight for someone. But ultimately, something's just got to work in practice. So theories are wonderful, but actually the club and the player have to coexist and work together. So, but likewise, any of those guys to come and have a chat, we would welcome the opportunity. It'd be fascinating to hear what they have to say and to discuss some of the theories and the principles around it and what works and why. So yeah, we'd love that. Paul Dunn, any tips for a fellow glasses wearer when playing golf, Simon? Ever struggled to make a full turn whilst maintaining sight of the ball? Well, maintaining sight of the ball, well, I don't wear rimmed glasses when I play rimless. And thankfully, I don't have a strong prescription, so I'm only a -1.5 with a very, very slight stigmatism. So I could play without glasses, but it'd be like that the whole way around, be squinting the whole way around. So I'm fortunate I don't have a strong prescription. The difficulties come in rain and wind, where it doesn't matter how low you put your cap down over your glasses, it still gets them wet. And I found that a rain grip glove is a really good glasses wipe up to a point. Regarding keeping sight of the ball at the top of the backswing, it's actually not something I'm that fussed about. If you're looking down the ball, if you're making a full turn, well, actually, you're only going to lose sight of the ball if you're coming out of posture. So thinking about it, it's not something clear for that. I'm trying to work it out myself at the same time. am I consciously keeping my eye on the ball? I'm consciously staying in posture, but I think if in order to get a full rotation, you're losing sight of the ball, or if just by making a swing you're losing sight of the ball, either mobility could be an issue, because if you're losing sight of it, then you're probably coming up and out of posture. So in terms of to get a full turn, you're likely to be losing that spine angle, and then it goes out of your sight line. So either your body's not letting you do something, or you're going beyond your body's capabilities. And the two might sound like the same thing, but it depends. Either you're sort of trying to push yourself beyond what your body really wants to be able to do, or functionally through, most of us have stiff backs from being sat at a desk, or just having done sport over the years, or injuries. It's either a case of listening to, well, both are a case of listening to your body. One might be a case of working on a little bit of mobility. But actually, you know what, if you can stay in posture and balance, don't worry too much about kind of keeping the ball visible at the top of the backswing. If you're staying in posture, as you come back round, it'll come back into view. But go based on what your ball striking does best. If you're going beyond what you can see, then maybe rein it back a little bit and see if that can help. But rimless glasses, for me, that certainly is a key thing. Outside of that, one of the difficulties can be varifocals. So particularly for short game, depth perception. I know someone who switched to varifocals, and they started fatting because the ball looked closer than it was. So they ended up dipping, or sorry, further away than it was, ended up getting down to the ball and finding the ground first. So it can be complicated depending on what your vision's like. But yeah, taking the frame out, that's certainly a good thing. Monocle, James says monocle, yeah, just a massive visor around the eyes. F1 helmet, that could work. Good evening, Simon, Bama number 1. Do you have any insight into the KBS TD70 shaft profile? Stiff butt, mid, tip, question mark. Thanks as always. So the KBS, the TD shafts are quite they're quite a particular feel. So they do play quite low torque. They have a little bit of responsiveness in the tip, but generally a slightly stronger mid to upper mid section. So there's something that they tend to be, when they work well, they work really, really well. They're sort of a bit what I would call kind of mercurial. They're either very good or they just don't time. I'm not quite sure why, but they seem to be quite particular in that respect. But generally suit. Thank you very much. So this is the model, the KBS, the TD series. A little bit closer there, try and focus in on that. So they tend to suit a slightly stronger swinger, which then that's where you're getting that load into that midsection. You get a little bit of kick into it, get a bit of responsiveness. So yeah, they tend to suit someone who works the shaft a little bit more. And so that strength in that upper midsection then kind of hangs on to that a little bit, but tends to respond for that kind of swing style. So I hope that answered that for you. Glenn 400, currently playing E1 ping irons from my wedge in the True Temper XP 95 green dot for lie. I've recently purchased, I'll put my teeth back in, some Ping Glide 4.0 in the ZZ115 Nippon shaft, blue dot, but I'm struggling. There is a reasonable uplift in shaft weight, and certainly the ZZ115s don't swing that tip light. There is a bit of balance in the bottom end, so it could just be that there's too much of an uplift in dead weight there. The XP95s, Ping in the main body of their irons tend to set the swing weights up a little bit lighter than most, so you'll tend to find their swing weights are around D0, D0.5, whereas a lot of the other brands would be D1 to D2. So in a 95, it could be C9, C9.5. Obviously, it depends on what length parameters. There are a few variables in there, but certainly as a general rule, they're always a little bit lighter swing weight than most, but then the wedges kick up a little bit more. So there could just be a bit too much of a difference between the two shafts from a dead weight, or potentially the swing weight variable between the two being a little bit spread. So chances are it's one of those two bits. But if it's the wedges that you're struggling with, they're probably swinging a little bit heavy. With them struggling, so I've just seen the second half of that, struggling with them due to strike, flight, etc. Any ideas why this would be? Yeah, strike, certainly the change in balance, and then you're going to be trying to manage that extra balance to put the club on the back of the ball, and then all the consistency will go. So certainly it's a dead weight / balance side of things. Mark Griffin, have you seen and do you have any opinion on Avoda Golf combo length irons? I've seen some reviews that are impressive. They're not something that we've got our hands on yet, so it's not something I can give a considered opinion on. I think anything with sort of length progressions, combos, I think that there's, the Avodas are something which we've not seen a huge amount of, so I wouldn't want to state something on here without really being able to go into detail on it. But there are very, very valid theories on a lot of things, particularly with the length progressions. So obviously it works for Bryson not having a length progression. Yeah, unfortunately I can't give you a considered opinion on that, and as a result I'd rather not commit to anything than say something without having proper background information on. Brian McAllister, just going back to the swing weight discussion, I tend to MOI match the iron set. I've often heard mixed views on this. What are your own thoughts? Thanks again for the content. Well, thank you for the questions. MOI matching, again, it's a great theory, but MOI matching requires you to swing the club at the same effort level and create the same acceleration profile. So again, it's a great theory, but it doesn't work that way through the set. So, and go back to Bryson, he tries to swing his 5-iron and 9-iron at the same speed, but he swings the 5-iron faster because he knows he's hitting it harder, or got to hit it further, rather. So, because the effort level changes, the MOI of the club has to change a little bit as well. Now, it's a much better principle than just swing weight matching, but it goes a little bit, it's a little too steep. So you end up with a short iron that just swings too heavy. So with MOI matching, basically you're at half a point progression, give or take a little bit each club, which is just a little bit too strong in our experience over the 20 odd years. It's just, the principle's great, but again, it's a theory rather than a practice, and in practice, I think a slightly softer, basically a halfway house. Essentially, it's so progressing swing rate is what we would call kind of common sense MOI matching. It's where the intensity of the swing from a long iron to a short iron just drops down a little bit, so that progression just needs to soften down a little bit as well. But it's the science behind it makes sense, but there's a variable called the human in there, which just creates a little bit of a change on what the principle is, but much better than static balancing. Golf Nerd 3, after changing any component, shaft, grip or club head, is using the previous swing weight for that club of less importance, so would you retune it as a new club? Absolutely. I mean, the grip actually you can change and match swing weight, as long as you're not changing the dead weight of the grip by much. If you are changing the size of the grip from a standard to a mid-size, you could be going up 10 grams or more. So if you're doing that, you're adding head weight to match swing weight, and then you're throwing the total weight of the club completely off, so be very, very careful of that. But if the grip weight is staying within a couple of grams, then actually you can just redo swing weight and be nigh on identical. And same with the club head actually, although that's changing a little bit as well. You take I'm just going to grab these two club heads very quickly just to help explain this point. And you take two club heads, the 10K Ping and the TSR3. Well, as you'll see from this, they're two different sizes, and the Ping 10K has an awful lot more weight positioned at the back, whereas with the TSR3 it's distributed a little bit more evenly through the head. So actually, swing weight wise, they will be slightly different between the heads because of the way that mass, how far it is from the tip of the shaft, it gears differently. So you will find that a head with a deep weighting at the back will need to be a slightly different swing weight than a head with a more forward balance, more forward center of mass, because you've got a much shorter distance between that center of mass and the tip of the shaft than you have on this style of head. So that's something we've seen for the last few years. That's something that's become more and more key. You can't just switch your head, match a swing weight and everything's good. The further back the weight is, it can actually, for someone like me who rotates the face open and closed in the swing, it can actually leave the head open through the ball. So my miss is normally left, but then a heavy back weighted head tends to fan underneath and leaves it open. So there are a few variables in there, but essentially I guess what this comes back to is, unless it's the grip that you're changing with a very, very small grip weight difference, basically anything else requires you just to retune it in. sort of very long-winded way of getting to that answer. But thank you, it's a really good question, and it's something that a lot of people get wrong. They say, well, change a grip or change a head, or change a shaft, build it to the old swing weight, and the club just doesn't work. So it's a great question, that. Denny, what's the difference between you using the same length? I'm just going to just check I get the understanding. What is the difference between you use the same length with 7, 6, 5 irons and just changing the loft to get the same distance compared to the stock length of loft? Okay, so if you don't have a length progression, then you don't have a club speed, as much of a club speed progression. So the loft gaps have to be a little bit bigger to achieve the same distance progression, unless you have a progression of head design as well that gives a bit more ball speed throughout each of those heads. So, for me playing, blades with no forgiveness until I get to 4-iron, I would have to go more like 5-degree gaps to get the same distance progression that I currently play, because I'm losing a mile an hour of club speed. You then lose mile an hour and a half of ball speed. That's 2 to 3 yards. So you've got to go a degree stronger in order to get that distance back. So that's one of the caveats to it, and why you generally will see that one length. Cobra only really offer it with a head with a progressed tech in the face to get that ball speed gain. So so that's why there's got to be a little bit of a difference. I hope that answered the question correctly as well. Martin Williams, hi, what are the thoughts on broomstick putters, broom handle putters? Broomstick you could fly away on, broom handle you can putt with. I've struggled with my putting for most of the 40 years that I've played, so I'm thinking of giving one a go. So thoughts on it, I mean, they can really make a big difference. If I get my putter out. So with conventional putting, the problem can be that, we've got hinges in our wrists. So essentially, that can happen, which can send the club face all over the place. So if you get a little bit, I guess, conscious of what's going on, just need to look at Rory a week and a bit ago, that there can be, and Stuart described it as a bit of electricity in the fingers, in that they want to start doing things that we really don't want to do. The moment you get a bit of tension in your hands, you fire up the muscles in your forearm and they can start moving around. So what you'll generally find is golfers over the years have gone to cross-handed or side by side, anything to take to even the hands out. Now, Bernard Langer, seeing as exponent of the broom handle putter, he years back went, putter up the forearm, so he was ahead of his time in terms of what he was doing here. And this is going back to the Ryder Cup in 1991, the famous War on the Shore, where he had the attempt at the winning putt for Europe and famously missed it, sort of lipped out. But in order to get rid of, he'd suffered from problems with the putting with the yips, he went down the shaft and then held the handle there, so clamped it in. So essentially, it's not a lot of difference than what kind of Bryce and these guys are doing. By pressing it against the forearm, you're effectively anchoring it against your forearm. So he did that, held it in there, and then putted back and through. So by doing that sort of thing, you're trying to, one, get a bigger muscle group making the swing, but taking out the little muscles that basically screw everything up. Now, if you go to the broom handle, now I don't have one down here, but I'm going to go to a driver to get sort of close to it. Essentially, the principle of the broom handle putter is that, I'm going to go side on for this one, is you hold at the top. Now, years back, you used to be able to hold it against your chin or hold it against your chest to anchor it, which you're now not allowed to do. But it essentially stopped this end moving, and then you're just literally letting the club swing effectively back and through. You're just moving it back, move it through, and if everything goes to plan, they're a very heavy club because of the length of them, but the mass takes you back, takes you through, and it's harder to move it offline. Now, obviously, anchoring it at one end, not great. It does take a bit of, one would argue, the skill out of it. So now you've got to have it away from you. You can't be touching your chest or your chin. But the principle remains the same. You grip it at the top, and then using the mass of the putter, you're moving it back and forth. And so taking some of those little fine forearm twitches out, it becomes just then, you're swinging the whole thing back and through. And the mass of the putter is part of that momentum of it taking it back and through, is part of what makes it harder to move it out of line, out of plane. So it's absolutely worth trying. I mean, there are a few models. I mean, there aren't that many. They go through phases where you go back 10 years. I think there were 4 or 5 of them, and then a couple of years back, Callaway, Odyssey certainly did one. I'd have to think about who else. And there are a few of the arm lock variants, because that's the kind of the current, for want of a better phrase, trend, and that kind of locks it against the arm. But that puts the stroke out on the front, so it can be a slightly awkward feel. Yeah, certainly something to give a go. We have fitted and built broom handle putters over the years, and there have been people that's made a massive difference to their putting. So, and just look how successful Bernhard Langer is. So certainly worth a go. Jay Lee, hi Simon. Trouble finding the right driver shaft to irons a KBS Dollar Taper 120 and TaylorMade mini driver UST Pro Force 65 M40X. Which feels great. Any suggestions will be appreciated, thanks. So if you're in the mini driver, then potentially that would suggest that you might have had a bit of a long-term struggle with the driver, and sometimes driver shaft length is actually the biggest issue. The mini drivers come in at 43.5 inches, and standard drivers have been up to, in the past, been up to 46.5 inches, which is quite frankly ridiculous. The best players in the world don't play them that length. But so 45.5. So there's a lot of club to control. The dollar taper shafts are, the 120 is quite a sturdy weight, but they're very evenly balanced. They're not a tip heavy shaft. So if we were trying to say, right, what shaft sort of falls in line with that, if you're looking at the kind of the moderate price point end of things, the VRTX Blue is a great value option at that price point. It's a Project X shaft. The VRTX is generally only available through club fitters and builders. God, James, he's already been in the gym today. He's getting even more running in. I should do this every Monday. So that shaft there, that's a mid to high balance, so much more kind of inline balance profile wise with the dollar taper. Other than that, then I would say, let me have a think. You don't want to go fully counterbalanced. If you're going higher end and wanting more feel out of it, then the TPT options, the red range in the high, that's a great one. Next batch along on the right of the TPTs. And actually also maybe the, thank you very much, that Tensei 1K Blue, again, very neutral balance point. So the TPT in the red range has the, I find it there, the red denotion there. There's a gold version which is called the Nitro, which is a little bit more stout, similar in terms of balance point, but super high end materials, definitely a harder feeling shaft. So, but those are a couple of options that in principle from a balance point of view would tie into the dollar taper, but it may just be a shorter shaft might work best for you, which is why you like the TaylorMade Burner Mini. Norwegian Warhound, good evening to you. How are you? Not sure if you'll make it this far, but I was curious what your thoughts are on a modern day equivalent to the Ping iBlade. Got to get back to work. Take care. iBlade, the iBlade, yeah, that was a slightly narrower sole shape than the current blueprints, and the current blueprint S isn't a bad option. I think it'd be interesting to see what TaylorMade launched, what we've seen images of the new cavity back, the CB model. Doesn't look too far away. It's got a little bit of a cavity. Titleist CB isn't that far off. The iBlade had a little bit of a scoop, a little bit of weight at the bottom, but wasn't that forgiving. I think there are a few of the CB heads that could work, or maybe an Apex CB. Any of those with a little bit of a muscle mass at the bottom, but not a lot of forgiveness. If you try and put too much forgiveness into it, you're going to lose the structure of the head and start to feel maybe a little bit of the guts to the strike. I think otherwise you're going more into where the I guess the I200 kind of structure would be. So a really simple head actually, almost the simpler the better, and like a kind of a basic CB head would be one of the closest to that. Mojo Chow, great name. Are the Oben shafts, if money wasn't a factor, wouldn't that be lovely? I'd have them in a beat, design my golf swing around them, aesthetically Japanese golfing nirvana. Yeah, the Oben shafts are great. If you go to the top end of it, the Oben, the Airburst AK, are an unbelievable shaft from a quality material point of view, Olympic materials, and they're certainly pushing the boat out, and you're one of the shaft brands pushing the boat out with the quality of materials they're using. If you think these sort of materials are used in fly fishing rods, and they've got an incredibly cool weave that you can hopefully see onto that. But just quality materials in these, absolutely fantastic. As you say, if only cost wasn't an issue, wouldn't life be fantastic? PS, I'm assuming that's Peter. Does it make sense to build a set of irons, lighter head weight on longer irons and gradually increase head weight on the shorter irons, keeping the swing weight similar? So Peter has a very particular reason for asking this question, because he had a bit of nerve damage in his neck. So there's a bit of an injury to account for here. So there is, a bit of that graduation in terms of head weight is there anyway. The dead weight of the clubs do progress through the set, so the long irons are still a little easier to swing. For you, Peter, I think probably a slightly softened swing weight progression. I don't think the same swing weight quite works, because that then makes the long irons proportionally heavy, but it might well be the slightly softened progression for you is the right way to go. But ultimately, we've tested that a little bit with some of the switch grips. We're going to get some of those and weights in to test out. For Peter, his right hand, he plays right-handed, and right hand, he can't save the club head with it, so the club's just got to really find the slot for him and find the ball really cleanly. So using the fine-tuning of the weight at the grip end to really dial in, very, very fine-tune the swing weight in, something that I think is a fascinating exercise, and I think we should hopefully come out with a spot-on set of clubs for you. Van House, hi Simon, I play Mizuno 223, MP223 with Project X IO 6.0 shafts. On a launch monitor, my spin seems very low, around 4,000 on a 6-iron, swing speed around 90 miles an hour on a 6-iron, hit down 2 to 3 and into out 3 to 6. So yes, now depending on what balls you're using, I will always use that caveat with any launch monitor, any spin data. If you're not using a premium golf ball, if they are not marked correctly for some of the track ones, or if they're not using the RCTs from a Titleist, if you're not getting reliable spin data, then be very cautious. However, at 3 to 6 into out, then you are going to deliver the club head a little more closing and therefore take a bit of spin off. And 2 to 3 down is absolutely fine, but yeah, 4,000 on spin is very low. So I would certainly be looking at, the 223s aren't a low spin head, particularly. They don't launch it that high, but they aren't a low spin head. So it could be that just weakening the lofts off will help a little bit. It could be that a ball change, depending on what ball you're playing. If you're in a Pro V1, go Pro V1X, or if you want a softer feel, go something like the Bridgestone Tour BXS, or even a Strixon Z-Star Diamond. That'll really pick the spin up with the irons, 300 or 400 revs at least. But I think there is the shaft alone isn't going to make a big difference to that. Strike's going to be key, and then the face to path number and what you're doing dynamically with loft. If you're turning loft down, then you're going to turn spin down. So from where your path is, either you aim left and hit a block so you're not closing the face down, or work on just squaring that path a little bit so you can leave the face on line, deliver dynamically a bit more loft and see a little bit more ball flight. But ball type could certainly help you depending on what you're using. Would it be something to address equipment-wise? What loft? Yeah, your head style, maybe a T100 might spin a hair more. I should really check the question underneath, shouldn't I? But actually, you're not in a low spin head, so it's likely to be dynamic loft, face to path if you're closing it a lot, and or golf ball. Tony C, can you give 2 driver head recommendations for someone who strikes the low heel with their existing driver? So I've certainly found the TSR3 that I've been using. I certainly found that very good. If you get it a bit low heel, ball speed retention's good and the spin doesn't flare too much. It's certainly something that I think it'll be fascinating to see what the GT range does. I know that Titleist are pretty excited about it. We have had a brief look. Obviously, I can't talk about performance and numbers, but we have hit them. And initial impressions are pretty good. There's not huge amounts that can be gained. The TSR series is very, very good as well, but certainly Titleist are very excited about it, and they generally don't big things up that much. They're generally pretty honest with things, and there's a little bit more than just a cosmetic change for sure. Some structural changes are definitely there in the heads, but unfortunately, to say any more, you'll have to wait a few weeks, I'm afraid, into August by the time I can talk about anything. But that's certainly a good one. And the other ones that are generally pretty good out the heel, certainly ball speed retention, the triple diamond Callaways. That particularly with weight forward, ball speed retention is great, and they do tend to stop the spin popping too much as well. So those would be the two I would generally kind of, if you're a mid to higher speed player, I'd certainly look at those two first. Yeah. Richard Jagger, hi Simon. What's the effect of if an iron shaft is too light or too heavy based on an average swing speed? So I'll do a quick demo on this. If an iron shaft is too light, or if any shaft is too light, if it gets too light, then as you go to build speed, there's basically not enough to hit against. So the club doesn't drop into plane. It doesn't have to be perfectly on plane, but into the player's swing plane. You can't use the weight to regulate how the club arrives at the ball. So it's a bit like if I grip right down, I lose some proportionate mass in the club head. So what happens is I go to build speed, I effectively go through the shot too soon. So one of two things generally tends to happen. One, where you basically chuck the club at the ball and hit it into the ground. And if I was aiming at that green, that would be an amazing trick shot. The other one is that it can tend to let the club get a little bit over the top, so we tend to, very exaggerated version, kind of cast it a little bit, and then first miss is likely to be left, but you've got to rein the swing back to deliver the club head and try and get some control. And then if we go a little too heavy in shaft, it's the equivalent of me gripping out the top of this. As I start to pull down, the club gets behind me, so then I've got to do something to get the club back on the ball. So again, it can end up bottoming out as that club drops in behind, catching the ground first and having, again, an exaggerated style of contact with that kind of bounce ground into the back of the ball like a fat shot. And the other bit is, ultimately, once that club's behind you, you've got to do something to get the club back to the ball. So on the physics of it, it's equal opposite forces. If I just carry on going and make my normal swing, I'm not putting enough energy into the handle to fetch it towards the ball. So what I've got to do is I've either got to stall out here so the club can catch up, or I've got to go that way to catapult the club through. So again, what happens is, you tend to see people who have that stand up out of it. A lot of that's because the club's too heavy and they're having to force the club through. So either way, you're losing control of the club, you're losing strike, you're losing consistency, and you're just not enjoying the game as much. So, Glenn 400, now we're going to get to the last few minutes. I'm going to power through as many of these as I can just to get to the end if I can. Regarding a recent question, if I found a set of true temper 95 shafts for wedges, is it straightforward to change heads onto the same shaft? In most cases, yes. However, only caveat on that, bore depths can change. So you can get a shaft that was the correct length, a good length in one wedge, put it into another head, it comes out too short. So that's the only element to concern about. The other bit I would say, some players a lot of players need a little bit of a heavier shaft weight. So it's about 60-40 heavier shaft weight and wedges to playing the same weight all the way through. So you may find, the 95s a little bit too light, but they're not going to be hard work. It might not be a natural thing of if they're in the irons that they work in the wedges, but equally speaking, they won't be too heavy, that's for sure. Tony Bythaway, hope you're well and good to see you on here. Acra TZ6 versus Ventus TR Red or New Red, which has the higher balance point, and general comments on each, please. Well, the TZ6, the standard one, is it higher? They're actually pretty similar balance points. What happens is actually the TR Red relative to weight, so if you take the TZ6 60 and the TR Red 6, the TR Red is about 5 or 6 grams heavier, the dead weight's heavier. Neither are particularly high or low balance, both are relatively neutral, but the dead weight, the proportionate weight on the TR is a little bit higher, so it will swing heavier as a result. I hope that answered that one for you. But TR Red is a bit of a stiffer butt. TZ6, a little bit of a lower torque, I believe, it certainly plays that way. You definitely get a little more kick out the TR Red than you will the TZ6. Tony C, how much does eye dominance make? How much difference, I'm assuming, does it make when with putter neck styles? If I'm right eye dominant, what neck style should I look into and which should I avoid? The neck style, whilst it has an effect on how you see the putter and how you line it up, it has more of an effect on how the putter head gears around the shaft. So don't just do it based on eye dominance. If you're someone who leaves the putter face open, then a more face balanced putter, more sort of center balanced shaft line into the head. It doesn't have to be center shafted, but a more center balanced shaft line to the head will help you square the toe up a little bit more easily. If you tend to miss it left, then a more toe hang version will hold the face a little bit more open as you accelerate through the ball. If you're left eye dominant, you're generally going to prefer something with a little bit less offset, either it looks back from the shaft quite a long way, and vice versa. Right eye dominant tends to see those a little bit better. However, go on what squares the face better rather than just what you can see. However, both are important. So last couple here, I'm going to get through these. Just Pratap Singh, what are your thoughts on Edel single length? Same things on Cobras. I think the principle's great, but for the average golfer, the problem is that they get a little cumbersome in the short irons and particularly wedges. So they are a great base point if you are just starting out to minimize variables. However, it is very much a niche thing. Peter Caller, any update on getting a putter fitter on board? Regards, Pete. We are trying. We nearly had one start someone recently, but it's still something we're working on, still putting the feelers out, and when the right person comes along, we'll let you know for certain. And now I'm going to do, this is going to be the last one here. I'm going to do, this is Yeboah. Put a new grip on my driver that has an 18-gram weight at the end, and I'm losing it to the right a lot now. I'm a right-handed golfer. Any suggestions? Could the grip be causing that? 100%, 18 grams as a counterweight in a grip end is a heck of a lot. You think that's a third of the weight of the grip, so you're taking a 50-odd gram grip weight and making it basically 70 grams, which is the same weight as an oversized jumbo grip, which is vast. So if we're swing weight matching, you're going to have to re-weight the head by, what if we're going 18 grams, that's another 5 or 6 grams. So you're then increasing the dead weight by almost 25 grams. What you're also then going to do is bookend the weight, driver head, grip end, and then you lose a bit of connection to it. So almost with certainty that weight in the back of the grip is going to lose you control of the club head, lose a bit of the flow of the club through the ball, and that is why you just won't feel the club face anymore. So regulating it, squaring it's going to be really, really tough. So get that weight out as quick as you can. Actually, there is one question left. I'm going to get this one, seeing it's the last one on there. Doctor. That's the start of a joke there. Looking good for a Monday, thank you very much. Slightly burnt arms, but never mind. What's a good ball for a low swing speed who needs more spin? So actually, the low swing speed element doesn't require you to have to use a soft golf ball. Actually, at a lower swing speed, a little bit less compression of the core, you're actually going to get, particularly with the woods, a little bit more spin out of the premium golf balls, just the way that the core loads. So you don't have to go to a really soft golf ball if you're not a high swing speed player. Actually, you might find it helps you, going to something like a Pro V1X actually helps you gain a little bit of spin, because you're getting grip from the cover into the face, because it's not squashing so much into the face. So actually going to a Pro V1X or say that Bridgestone, the XS ball. Actually a ball, if you're really looking to gain spin, Mizuno's ball, I think it's the RB. I'd have to double check that one just to make sure I'm not getting the name wrong, but their balls have been really high spin in the past. So that potentially is one worth looking at. But any of the premium higher spin balls, you will definitely gain some spin from. Thank you so much for all the questions, for keeping me speaking for the entire hour and not getting lost and not having to let you guys down by not having to say. So no, it's been brilliant. Really enjoyed that. There've been some great questions coming on. Thank you so much for all the interaction. We're here for you guys with all our videos, in particular this Monday. So answer any questions you like, whatever you want us to hit. We're more than happy to do so. And say thank you so much for all the questions. It's been fantastic. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hopefully, fingers crossed, Stuart will be back next Monday, and we'll have plenty to talk about. Like, subscribe, watch all the videos, let us know what you want us to do as well. We're certainly open to any suggestions on that. Have a great rest of the Monday evening, and we'll see you next week.